Here in the here and now, we're going to talk about Wemby and what he has to say or what he had to say to Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer. If you didn't know this, if you somehow missed or you're somehow unaware, Wemby did this massive sit down with The Ringer, and Kevin O'Connor, KOC, does such a great job at covering the NBA. One of the best in the business when it comes to NBA coverage, both, obviously the current association and the draft, the overall process. Cannot give him a more prominent enough seal of approval. So he sat down with Wemby and they talked about this, that, and the other. You can watch it on the Ringer's YouTube channel, or you can listen to it on the Ringer NBA Draft Show. But Wemby, he touched on, basketball. He touched on I won't say his personal life, but he touched on, a couple of different things as we have learned over the last year. Wemby is a very unique person, and he is somebody who is going to, in all likelihood, take the Spurs to the highest of highs when his career is all said and done. But this season, hopefully, was the lowest of lows that he will experience. And on the subject of that, he was asked by KOC what the lowest point was. And I think that that's a really interesting question in and of itself, but we would all probably have a different answer. Here's what Wemby had to say on that front.
The lowest point? I mean, I would say very simply it's the long losing streak because it was, there was a couple close games that we should have won. We could have, but we should have won them. And it's just, yeah, at some point you need to, there's so many shifts in, energy because one moment you're so motivated to win, like same the group is so motivated to win and to finally end the streak, and then it's like, oh, we lose again. So, but I'm glad that nobody collapsed under this, or nobody, you know, starting being bad for the group, or being selfish. So I'm glad like we stuck together and we got over it, but it was definitely a tough point.
So I'm not trying to be that guy, but there were several losing streaks to pick from. My estimation is the one that Wemby is referring to is the 18 game losing streak. And to kind of walk you down memory lane, because it feels like so long ago, and we're going to do our best to kind of forget this after Wemby's won a million titles. This began on Sunday, November the 5th. Remember the 5th of November. That's what V for Vendetta taught us. Also, November 5th, 1955 was the day that the Doc invented time travel. Marty went back in time to it. So November 5th, also infamous in this capacity. Spurs lost an overtime game at home against Toronto. That was the only home game sandwiched in between a 6-game stretch that otherwise included 5 road contests. So the Spurs dropped that one, lost by 7, 123, 116 to the Raptors in overtime on that Sunday. And it started off a run that we do not want to remember. Speckled Truth says, in brutal transparency, I thought Wemby was overhyped and going to be a bust. Glad I was wrong. I'm glad that you were wrong, too. I don't know that anybody agreed with that. No offense to you, Speckled Truth, but I think we all were afraid to dream. I think we were all afraid to believe that he could actually be that good. And this losing streak was kind of, it fed that insecurity. And at the time, the Spurs were coming off. I mean, this was the beginning of the season. They were 3-2. They just won those back-to-back games at Phoenix. So they lose this game against Toronto and then lose at Indiana, lose against the Knicks. I mean, there's a 117-110 loss to Minnesota in there, a 118. They got blown out in one of the in-season tournament games at Oklahoma City, 123-87. I mean, and that was just the beginning of this whole thing. They kept going. They got blown out by the Clippers in the first game in it wasn't a back-to-back, but first game in back-to-back games against LA. They lost every in-season tournament game. If you did put stock into those, they lost a kind of close one in Denver. They lost a close one at home to the Hawks on November 30th, 137-135, the final score there. I mean, this was long and arduous, this whole thing. The Spurs lost 18 games in a row. It started on Sunday, November 5th. The streak was broken on Friday, December the 15th, with a 129-115 win at home against the Lakers. The Spurs would lose 5 in a row right after that. So I don't blame Wemby, certainly, for feeling like that was the lowest point of his season. And everything I just ripped through there, wasn't a lot of numbers, but it's a lot of information. And To kind of piggyback off of what Speckle Truth said, I thought Wemby was overhyped and going to be a bust. Glad I was wrong. I don't think it's possible for him to be a bust at this point because he's too smart. And that is such a powerful tool in his repertoire. I think we've really learned that. Um, we have heard all sorts of stats, all sorts of impossible, statistics and data points and this, that, and the other. The Wemby that we've, come up with, the 5x5. I mean, he has broken, the model that tracks so much information. And what is really cool about that is he apparently likes that. Wemby, according to him, he loves analytics.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Um, yeah, this is something I'm very interested at. I love these what they call it, like graphics. Like I don't even know the word. Like graphics. I love stats. I love percentages. I'm really into that.
Okay, so like you like seeing what like that helps you understand your own game.
Yeah, Pop showed me something. I remember before the Toronto game and before some other games as well. I can't remember when. But yeah, I have seen some of those.
I am a big data person. I love information and I love statistics. And it's, people say that numbers lie, whatever, the adage is. And it's true that you can find numbers to support just about any claim that you want. But it's important to apply context to those numbers and use them, not in a completely, totally storytelling sort of way, but in a way that helps you learn in an introspective sort of way. And I trust that Wemby is certainly in that kind of camp where he can take data and he can learn from it and not come to a wide sweeping conclusion about it. So that was very, very, very cool. Also cool from this, there was a lot here. Now, before we get to the Pop stuff, that's one level of coolness. I am not as big of a fan of Wemby, running point as a lot of people, and some of that is just, that's my non-data. So the non-data side of my brain is just being too simplistic, and he's so tall, he's so large, he's so wide. Just let him be that. Um, Plus, there's the turnovers, right? We've seen that happen a million different times so far. That's one of the bigger flaws in his game if he has one. Um, but he is clearly passionate about wanting to run point and wanting to be the one, and I don't think that that's changing anytime soon.
And I mean, I think it's the future of the game. So I mean, you see that even Giannis, this is this is really the usage of all the weapons, and it's working. So I think I'm glad we started early on to do that, but I'm sure it's also the future. Yeah.
It's hard to disagree with him. It really is, and I mean, who would I even be to disagree with Victor Wembanyama? Obviously, um, and there are not a lot of human beings on this earth, and it's crazy when you put it in terms like that. But there are not a lot of human beings that are capable of doing what he's doing. Now, we can talk about and we can quibble about. I don't even know that it's quibbling because it's fair. The turnovers. I mean, he's had again a ton of them over the course of his short career so far. Um, and that's something that has to change, right? That's something that has to be better. They have to absolutely tighten that up. He can't just be this turnover machine that we've seen. In fact, as we look at his game log here in the win last week against the Nuggets, last Friday night. But before, so he had 9 a couple of games back in the loss against Philadelphia. And outside of that, he kind of tightened up for a while. There was a stretch where was just, I mean, every night was 5, 6, 7 turnovers. And so that is the risk, I think. There is there are a lot of pros to be gained with having Wemby run the point and having the ball just kind of flow and facilitate through him constantly. And ultimately, if we decide and the Spurs decide that that's in the best interest of the team, they want to live and die by that sword, then so be it. But if he wants to do it, I think that that's probably the ultimate, kind of ace card. But, how Pop feels as well clearly matters. And this was maybe the best part of the interview. Wemby was talking about Pop and, how he felt about Pop. And it was very cool. He was asked about his favorite part about being coached by Pop. And, well, I mean, what an answer.
Favorite part? like the accountability. He doesn't care who you are, and you know, whoever you're a vet, you're a rookie. He's gonna treat you the same and tell you when you mess up.
Stuff like that sounds like sports cliche, right? Stuff like that sounds like, oh man, that's just it sounds fake, right? It sounds fake that somebody would actually be that way, but there are so few sports figures like Pop. That so few people that have the resume, whatever you want to call it, to be able to hold people like Wemby accountable, to say you're clearly the most important person in this organization by a wide margin, and we're still going to hold you accountable. And I really respect that Wemby is willing to go on record and saying that. That says a lot about him. Frank says in the Brigade Bar, that's the only way you get better is by making mistakes. That's pretty much what accountability is. I mean, so very cool. Now, holding someone accountable can be something you do in a loving way. It can also be something you do in a, we'll call it, harsh manner. Wemby was, in talking about Pop, he expressed that he was kind of surprised that Pop was not so bristly.
I'd say easier because I would think I mean, before meeting him, I would have thought he was like more of an not, but he's actually very fair, and I mean, what we hear of Popovich, growing up, it's like yeah, like crazy coach, and I mean, super great coach, of course, but and he's actually pretty fair, not there's some unfair coaches, but he's fair.
I think that's, when you are as large of a figure as Pop, when you've had as much success as he has, and some of that success turns into its own sort of thing, right? You think of, obviously, Pop and Belichick are pretty comparable in that sense, and there's this persona, this Darth Vader-ness that kind of is built around what is actually happening because it's convenient from a storytelling standpoint, from a narrative standpoint. Um, and I agree with Cougs, for what it's worth, in the Brigade Bar. It says Wemby met Grandpa Pop, completely different person. That's true, but still, same dude in a lot of ways. But definitely, it's interesting how time always kind of works itself out, and that this might be the version of Pop that Wemby needed the most. Wemby in this gentle sort of manner himself. I'm not saying he couldn't or wouldn't have thrived with a more bristly version of Pop, the Pop that we've seen in the past many different times, but it feels really fortuitous the way the stars kind of aligned at this moment in time for Wemby, for Pop, for everything around them to kind of set the foundation for what is to come throughout the course of Wemby's career. But kind of funny. I mean, it's always, just a funny little line. I think, by the way, this answer is a reflection of how relaxed Wemby was in this interview. It was really, really, really great. I cannot encourage you enough to watch the entire thing. But the real good stuff, the juice that we were after, was what happens next, right? I mean, we're all, very happy and pleased with who Wemby is and who he's become, and very excited for the future. But what is that future? What does that look like? What is the future going to have in store for the Spurs? Who is going to be a part of that future with Wemby? He discussed his expectations for the months to come, and what he sees the Spurs doing around him.
My expectations are, I mean, I trust the front office and the coach. But the truth is, I don't know. I've learned a lot this year, and that's we've gotten so much better from day one to 82nd game. But I don't know, and I'm sure like the coaches will let me know what are the 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 new roads of progression we want to take, and but I don't know. This is the only team I've ever known.
What a that was a little bit more political, right? Like if we look at, you know, his answer about Pop and how loose he was, all of a sudden it turned into, I got to say the right things, I got to toe the company line, I got to, be careful not to get myself or my team in trouble. Um, it's true that this is the only team he's ever known. It's true that the Spurs changed significantly over the course of the season from game 1 through 82, as you mentioned, but it's also true that some of what we saw at game one didn't change, right? Like Wemby changed and became even more than we ever could have possibly imagined. But that means that the work around him has to change. And that means that the roster around him has to change. That means they have to find players to properly, you know, suit this whole thing. And, all due respect to the players who comprise the roster for this past season, they just do not have the horses in tow at the moment. Now, how the Spurs retool the roster obviously remains to be seen. We expect them to be active, in the draft, and we'll see what happens with the Toronto pick. But there's a lot of people, myself included, who want to see them be aggressive in pursuing a player, who want to see them be aggressive in pursuing an all-star. Maybe that's a little bit too much. Fine, whatever. But the Spurs are going to have to bring in some veteran help. And there's no question that veterans around the league have taken notice of who he is and what his capabilities are and what his potential is. And they're tired of kind of getting destroyed by him, and they might want to start teaming up. And Wemby was asked if he has had anybody tell him, like, hey, what's going on there in San Antonio? You guys have room for me on the roster?
Yeah, I've received some messages, even from like prospects, but I try to stay in my role, and but it's it's a whole new world and that I'm eager to discover. But for sure, one day or the other, I have to be involved in this, I guess, even though I'm staying my role as a player.
So first things first, while I appreciate the transparency, Wemby, maybe chill out. Maybe don't open any sort of tampering, you know, stuff. Don't open up an investigation saying this, that, or the other. I think he, threw out a wide enough blanket saying I've received some messages, but be cool, man. Don't let anybody know what's going on. Just keep certain cards close to the vest. Our thanks again to the Ringer and to Kevin O'Connor. This was a wonderful interview that you should absolutely go listen to in its entirety. These were kind of the high points from it. And the summer of Wemby is just beginning, right? I mean, Wemby kind of is at the epicenter of everything that we're going to care about from a basketball standpoint for a very, very, very long time. But this is the most critical summer of the Spurs as a franchise it's certainly in a very long time, but maybe if ever, because they're now entering this new window, this new opportunity. They're trying to recreate their dynasty in a whole different sort of way, or extend their dynasty, if you want to look at it that way, I suppose. And so they've got to get to work, and that obviously includes, Wemby at the forefront of it all, but that includes a lot of people around him, whether they're the ones sending him messages or not. He's got the Olympics going on that we're going to be paying a lot of attention to. And he maybe has some level of recruitment to kind of take care of, whether that's happening behind closed doors or not, whether that's happening in a way that he isn't publicly disclosing. But he mentioned it. This is a different world. He is now the center of an NBA franchise. He is now one of the 5 at the largest, most prominent people in the NBA as a whole. So it goes without saying that he's going to have to kind of do some things and be put in some positions that he probably never really gave serious thought to in his life. He's obviously been a professional forever, but he's so young. He's so young and raw in just life, in adulthood, and in corporate America, if you want to call it that. And so it's exciting to consider the opportunities that are in front of him, but they're obviously incredibly important and have to be seriousness. My favorite thing that Wemby said throughout the course of the whole thing was probably just, I appreciated his humility. I appreciate, though, more than anything, his sort of zest for knowledge, his zest for improvement. It's very clear that while he is raw and new at all of this, that he has dreamed about it. He has dreamed about, kind of living this life. And I appreciate how studied and how interested he is. He talked obviously about the data and the analytics and the graphs that Pop showed him. I love that he is just kind of this basketball nerd, and he's obsessed with improving himself and improving his game and becoming the best version possible of who he can be. And that ripple effect and how it's going to impact the Spurs is what we're all obviously incredibly fascinated by and what we're rooting for over the course of the coming months and really the coming years. Wemby is going to change San Antonio. Coog says he's a very polished 20-year-old. There are not a lot of people to that point like this, let alone people who are just so young. There's a lot of wisdom in Wemby, which I know for myself didn't exist in my 20-year-old brain. And so very, very fascinating. Once again, you can listen to Silver and Black every day in our audio vault. It is our podcast that we put up, so make sure to check out sasportsstart.com, the AA Best Bail Bonds audio vault. Look, I mean, this is when things are going to start to get a little bit more serious for the Spurs in a way that they haven't in a very long time. And I know that we're getting sick and tired of hearing that because it sounds old and tired. But the reality is that we're in a new frontier. We're in some unconquered land, even if it has been conquered in a literal sense before. These are uncharted waters. And if there's any captain of the boat that I would feel comfortable sailing behind, it is Victor Wembanyama.